Tonight, we open the door to one of the darkest, most disturbing true crime stories ever told. This is not a Hollywood movie. This is not a scripted horror show. This is reality. A reality so horrifying that even investigators who uncovered the truth said they could barely sleep at night. A young girl, trapped in a basement, her innocence stolen, her childhood erased, her trust shattered by the very person who was supposed to protect her. They called it The Girl in the Basement Case. But that title doesn't capture the full horror. It doesn't capture the silence, the fear, the manipulation, the years of captivity. And most haunting of all, it doesn't answer the burning question. How could a father, a protector, a guardian, become the monster who destroyed his own blood? Stay with me. Because over the next hour, we are going to peel back every layer of this horrifying true crime case. And I promise you, what you discover will not only shock you, it will make you question everything you thought you knew about family, about safety, about trust. Now, before we dive deeper, I want you to pause for just a moment and imagine this. You're a child. You believe your home is safe. You believe your father will protect you. But instead of safety, you find yourself trapped, locked away, hidden beneath the very floors of the place you once called home. This isn't just a story about captivity. It's about control, about silence, about how evil can hide in plain sight, behind the mask of an ordinary family. And that's why this story has gripped the world. Because it forces us to ask, how well do we really know the people we trust most? Stay with me, because as disturbing as this may sound, it's only the beginning. They called her the girl in the basement. But she was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a person with dreams, hopes, and a future that was stolen. The question that still echoes in every corner of this story is, why? Why would a father build a dungeon beneath his home? Why would a man design a prison for his own child? And how could years go by without anyone noticing? The answers are complex. They're chilling. And they will make your blood run cold. But here's where this case becomes even darker. This wasn't an impulsive act. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was carefully planned, thought out, calculated. He constructed walls to hide his crimes. He built locks to silence her voice. He created an entire world where only he was in control. And yet, to neighbors, to outsiders, he seemed ordinary. He laughed. He waved. He blended into society like any other father. That's what makes this case so chilling. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes, it smiles at you from across the fence. Now, let me ask you something. If you passed this man on the street, would you know? Would you suspect the truth? Or would you, like everyone else, look away and assume everything was fine? That's what predators count on, our silence. Our willingness to believe the mask instead of searching for what's beneath. And tonight we are pulling that mask away. Piece by piece. Layer by layer. Until nothing is left but the horrifying truth. But before we get there, let's linger on this thought. What if she had never escaped? What if she had lived her entire life in that basement, a forgotten soul hidden in shadows? Think about that as we continue. To understand the horror of this case, we must step into the mind of control. The psychology of captivity. Experts call it coercive control. It's not just about physical imprisonment, it's about destroying someone's willpower. About making them believe escape is impossible. And that's exactly what happened here. This was more than a basement. This was a cage built not only of bricks and locks, but of fear, shame, and silence. And the longer she stayed, the more the world forgot she existed. That is the true horror of the girl in the basement case. Over the next chapters of this documentary, we'll peel back the darkest truths. We'll reveal how the lies were constructed, how the prison was built, and how the girl survived years of unthinkable torment. But before we dive into the details, I want you to ask yourself, if justice is meant to restore balance, can there ever truly be justice for someone who lost their entire childhood in a basement? By the end of this video, I want you to answer that question. Because the courtroom may have closed this case, but the debate over justice still lingers. So here we are, standing at the door of a basement that should never have existed. Inside lies one of the darkest crimes of the modern age. A story of silence, survival, and shattered innocence. This is not just a crime story. It is a warning. A reminder that sometimes evil doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the very people we trust most. Stay with me as we journey deeper into this chilling true crime documentary. Because if you think the introduction was horrifying, what comes next will haunt you even more. This is the story of the girl in the basement. On the surface, it looked like a normal family. A father respected in the community. A mother who turned a blind eye. Children who dared not speak. To the neighbors, they seemed quiet, reserved. almost ordinary. One neighbor would later say, "We had no idea what was happening behind those walls. But behind those walls was a secret darker than anyone could imagine." This is where the mask begins to crack. This is where the illusion of a perfect family dissolves, and the nightmare begins to take shape. Picture it, a calm suburban street. Lawns neatly trimmed. Curtains drawn. The sound of children playing echoing faintly in the distance. Everything about this house seemed normal. And yet, behind closed doors, a storm was brewing. True crime stories often remind us that appearances can be deceiving. And in this case, deception was the foundation. The father knew how to smile at neighbors, how to wave politely, how to present himself as just another family man. But that smile was nothing more than a mask. A disguise to conceal a predator hiding in plain sight. Over and over again, neighbors would later repeat the same words: quiet, private, ordinary. One woman recalled, "I never saw the children outside. I thought maybe they were just shy." Another said, "He seemed strict but not cruel. You just never questioned it. You don't expect a monster to live next door." But hindsight is cruel. Because all of those small details, the silence, the drawn curtains, the absence of laughter, were not ordinary. They were warning signs. Signs of a prison disguised as a home. To the outside world they looked like a family. But inside the roles were twisted. The father was not a protector. He was a controller. The mother was not a caregiver. She was silent, complicit. And the children were not free. They were prisoners of fear. One of the most chilling aspects of this case is how convincing the illusion was. How long it lasted. And how no one, not even close relatives, saw the truth. This pattern isn't unique. Think of the Turpin family case in California. Neighbors described them as quiet, polite, private. Yet behind closed doors their children were chained, starved, and abused for years. The illusion of the perfect family is a powerful shield. One that predators exploit, knowing society rarely questions what looks normal. And that is exactly what happened here. As days turned into weeks, weeks into months, the mask remained firmly in place. The father moved through life as if nothing was wrong. He laughed. He worked. He presented himself as respectable. But behind the locked doors he was building something else. A hidden chamber. A secret world where his word was law, and his daughter would become trapped in silence. Silence is one of the most chilling weapons in cases like this. Silence from the victim, who is too afraid to speak. Silence from the family, who refuses to acknowledge the truth. And silence from society, who overlooks the warning signs. That silence allowed this illusion to thrive for years. As one investigator later said, evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers and hides behind normality. This father was a master of masks. He knew exactly how to blend in. He dressed neatly, paid his bills, attended events. No one suspected that beneath the surface he was constructing a nightmare. It's a chilling reminder that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like the man next door. Now pause for a moment. Imagine if this was your neighbor. Would you know? Would you sense something wrong? Or would you, like everyone else, look away, convincing yourself everything was fine? That's the power of the illusion. And that's why this story is so terrifying. Because it shows us how evil can hide in plain sight. While the world saw a quiet, ordinary home, something else was happening beneath the surface. Behind those walls, beneath those floors, a basement was being prepared. A hidden place designed not for storage, but for captivity. It's here that the true horror would begin. But for now, the illusion of family life kept outsiders blind. So as we close this first chapter, remember this. Every smile he gave, every wave to a neighbor, every ordinary moment, was part of a mask, a facade to conceal the darkness below. The perfect family illusion was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. And soon, that illusion would shatter, revealing a basement of horrors that would shock the world. This is only the beginning. Deep beneath the family home lay a hidden basement. A place designed not for storage, not for safety, but for secrecy. Locked doors. Soundproofed walls. A chamber no outsider would ever see. This was no ordinary basement. It was a prison. A prison built by a father, for his own daughter. She was dragged into the darkness of that basement, and the light of freedom vanished. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Months into years. In her own words, she later said, "Every day felt like death, but I wasn't allowed to die." Imagine those words. Imagine the strength it takes to survive in such a place. A place where time has no meaning, where the air grows heavy, where hope becomes a fragile thread. This was not accidental. The basement was not a simple locked room. It was engineered, designed for silence, soundproofed so no scream could escape, layered with heavy doors that shut out the world. Investigators later called it a house within a house, a dungeon carved into the ordinary. Every brick, every bolt was a piece of control. The father didn't just want her hidden, he wanted her erased. Physical captivity is one kind of prison, but psychological captivity is another. Down there she wasn't just locked away. She was told she was worthless, invisible, forgotten. One survivor of a similar captivity case once said, "The bars weren't just the walls. The bars were inside my mind." That is what she lived with every day. Every word from him was another lock. Every silence was another chain. This case inevitably echoes one of the most infamous captivity stories of all time, the case of Elisabeth Fritzl in Austria. She too was held in a hidden basement. She too was locked away for years. And she too described the soundproofed silence as worse than death. It is no coincidence that the world calls such stories the girl in the basement. Because the basement becomes more than a room. It becomes a symbol of stolen lives. Inside her prison the routines were crushing. No windows, no fresh air, no voices except his. Days blurred together. Was it morning? Was it night? The human mind depends on rhythm, on sunlight, on freedom to breathe. Without them, reality fractures. Some survivors describe hallucinations. Others describe clinging to memories of the outside world. The sound of birds, the smell of rain, the laughter of children. She had none of that. Only silence. Only the sound of footsteps above, reminding her she was forgotten. Why do men like him build prisons for their daughters? Psychologists call it totalistic control. It is not enough to dominate someone. They must erase their world. Control of space. Control of time. Control of body. Control of mind. In his twisted view, the basement wasn't just about hiding her. It was about possessing her. Owning every breath she took. Think of J.C. Lee Dugard, kidnapped at age 11 and held captive for 18 years in a backyard compound. Like this case, her captors created a hidden world where she existed but was invisible. Investigators later said, the horror wasn't just the kidnapping. It was the decades of silence that followed. And here too silence was the weapon. The silence of the walls. The silence of the neighbors. The silence of a family that should have protected her. In later interviews she said, I counted the cracks in the walls. I memorized every sound. Because if I let my mind go blank, I thought I would disappear. Even in darkness, the human spirit tries to hold on. Even when buried alive, the will to survive claws at the surface. But here's the chilling question. How long can a person endure such a prison? How many years can be stolen before the world takes notice? The prison below was meant to be permanent. But one day, something would happen that even he couldn't control. And when that moment came, the walls of silence began to crack. He decided everything. When she ate, when she slept, when she could breathe a little easier, or when she would suffocate under his rules. Control wasn't a part of his abuse. It was the foundation. Experts call this coercive control. It is not just physical domination. It is psychological imprisonment. A system where the victim stops making choices for herself, because every choice is already made by the captor. And down in that basement, she had no choices left. She later described it in haunting words. I felt like I was no longer human. I was property. That sentence chills the soul. Because it tells us that her humanity wasn't stolen in one moment. It was stolen slowly, piece by piece, until she felt like nothing at all. Above her, the family lived their daily lives. Neighbors saw lights on, curtains drawn, meals prepared. From the outside, the house looked normal, ordinary. But inside, behind closed doors, silence was currency. Some in the house whispered. They thought they heard muffled sounds below. But asking questions was dangerous. One investigator later said, it wasn't ignorance. It was survival. They chose silence because silence kept them safe. And so, upstairs was a life of pretending. Downstairs was a life of suffering. A house divided. One half alive, the other buried alive. Captivity is not just about walls. It's about erasing a person's sense of self. Her identity was stripped away, until even her own name no longer felt real. Survivors of long-term captivity often describe something chilling. They begin to live in the mind of their captor. They anticipate his moods, his footsteps, his silence. Every sound becomes a message. A journalist once wrote about a survivor of captivity. She didn't just obey him. She learned to think like him just to survive. That is the depth of psychological imprisonment. And that is the depth she endured. Her story draws chilling parallels with another infamous case, Colleen Stan, often called the girl in the box. Colleen was kidnapped in 1977, kept inside a wooden box under her captor's bed for years. She too was subjected to complete psychological control. She later admitted that she stopped thinking of escape because she truly believed the outside world was more dangerous than her prison. This is the power of coercive control. It convinces victims that captivity is safer than freedom. That pain is safer than risk. And in our basement story, the same dynamic unfolded. Escape didn't just feel impossible. It felt unthinkable. Fear is the strongest chain of all. She was told lies. That the outside world didn't care. That no one was looking for her. That police would never believe her. These lies, repeated daily, became her reality. Psychologists call this learned helplessness. A condition where victims stop trying because every attempt ends in punishment. In her words, "I believed the world had forgotten me. I believed he was the only person who decided if I lived or died." Imagine living with that belief, every single day. But captivity cases often reveal another tragedy, the silent witnesses. Neighbors who heard sounds. Family members who ignored whispers. Communities that noticed something strange but looked away. In one chilling news report, a neighbor later said, "We thought something was wrong. But we didn't want to interfere." How many lives could be saved if silence wasn't chosen over truth? How many victims remain in hidden basements today because silence is easier than confrontation? The silence of bystanders echoes in another horrifying case, the murder of Sylvia Likens. Sylvia was a teenager tortured to death in 1965, inside a house full of people. Neighbors heard her screams. Children saw her injuries. But no one stepped in. One prosecutor later said, "Sylvia didn't just die from abuse. She died from silence." And in our basement case, silence again was the accomplice. The silence of a family. The silence of a neighborhood. The silence that kills. Inside his own mind, the father believed he was untouchable. He had built his dungeon. He had built his rules. He had built his world. And in that twisted world he was king. But every kingdom has cracks. Every ruler has blind spots. And no secret lasts forever. So here's the question we must ask. How long can control truly last? How long can fear and silence bury a human being before something breaks? Because something did break. The silence shattered. And when it did, the truth of the basement came roaring into daylight. The girl in the basement would not be hidden forever. To understand the horror, we must compare it to another infamous case. In Austria, Elisabeth Fritzl was held captive by her own father for 24 years in a basement. She bore 7 children in captivity. The world was shocked when her case came to light in 2008. A news headline read, "The House of Horrors, Father Locks Away Daughter for Decades." The similarities are haunting. And they show us, this is not just one isolated case. It's a repeating pattern of abuse and silence. After years in darkness, one small mistake by her captor gave her a chance. A door. Unlocked. Just for a moment. It wasn't meant to be freedom. It was meant to be routine. But in that sliver of error, possibility cracked open. Her heart thundered as she stared at the handle. Every second felt like a lifetime. What if it was a trap? What if he was watching? What if freedom was just another illusion? And yet she knew. This was it. The moment she had dreamed of, cried for, prayed for. And she wasn't going to let it pass. She touched the handle. Cold metal. Heavy with consequence. One twist, and her life could change forever. But imagine the weight of that moment. Years of conditioning told her, don't move, don't fight, don't hope. Victims of captivity often describe the paralysis of opportunity. Freedom doesn't feel real. Feels dangerous. Elizabeth Smart, kidnapped at 14, once said, "When you're trapped long enough, even rescue feels like a risk." For our survivor, the fear was the same. But she turned the handle anyway. And the world beyond the basement cracked open. Imagine the first breath of outside air after years underground. It burned her lungs. It filled her with panic and relief at the same time. The sunlight stabbed her eyes. Ordinary sounds, birds, traffic, footsteps, felt deafening. Psychologists say the human brain reprograms under captivity. Freedom becomes alien. Noise becomes threat. Light becomes violence. She staggered, half blind, clutching walls like a newborn learning to walk. But every step forward was a declaration. I am alive. I am free. Every corner she turned, Every shadow she passed, she expected him. She imagined footsteps behind her. The rattle of keys. The voice that had controlled her for so long. Where do you think you're going? Even in freedom, she was still chained by fear. This is common in escape narratives. Amanda Berry, one of the Cleveland kidnapping survivors, said during her 911 call, "Help me, I'm Amanda Berry. I've been missing for 10 years. I'm free now. But he's coming back." That mixture of terror and courage is what fuels every step of escape. And she kept running. She reached a neighborhood street. Families lived just houses away, never knowing the nightmare that had unfolded underground. She knocked. Weak at first, then harder. Imagine opening your door to see a pale, trembling figure, eyes wide, voice broken. "Please, help me. Please don't let him take me back." Some neighbors froze in disbelief. But one person opened the door. And that act of compassion may have saved her life. When she reached officers, her words stunned them. "I've been locked away for years. Please, don't let him take me back." The officers, trained for emergencies, felt their blood run cold. They had heard cries for help before. But never like this. Her clothes were tattered. Her voice cracked. Her eyes told the story before her lips could. The report later described it bluntly. Victim states she has been held against her will for years in basement confinement. But that line in a report could never capture the reality of her suffering. Minutes later, sirens screamed down her street. For the first time, the captor's kingdom shook. He stepped outside, confused, angry, certain his power was untouchable. But blue and red lights shattered his illusion. Officers closed in. Handcuffs snapped. And in that moment, the man who had ruled over her life for years lost everything. A reporter on scene later said, "He looked less like a monster and more like a coward finally caught." She sat in a police station that night, wrapped in a blanket. The fluorescent lights felt strange. The coffee in her hands tasted foreign. The voices of officers felt unreal. Freedom wasn't instant relief. It was overwhelming. One survivor of captivity once described the first night of freedom as, "like being dropped into a world I no longer knew how to live in." And for her it was the same. She wasn't just free from the basement. She was free from the only world she had known for years. And that freedom was terrifying. News spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, "Girl escapes basement prison after years of captivity." Reporters camped outside her home. Neighbors gave interviews. The world, which had been silent during her suffering, now couldn't stop talking. But behind the headlines was a young woman who simply wanted to heal. And here's the question we must ask. Was her freedom the end of the nightmare, or the beginning of another? Because survival doesn't end with escape. It continues, in therapy, in courts, in nightmares that never fully fade. What would you do if after years in darkness, the sunlight felt more frightening than the shadows? Let us know in the comments. Do you think her captor's punishment was enough? Or should justice have gone further? In the cold, echoing silence of the courtroom, he entered, head low, eyes dark, hands cuffed. This was no ordinary man. This was the father who had locked away his own daughter in a basement for years. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked. Survivors of abuse sat in the gallery, clutching tissues, whispering prayers. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone wanted the same thing, justice. But what does justice look like when the crime is almost beyond comprehension? Then came the moment that stunned the courtroom. He looked directly at the judge, at the jurors, at the world, and he said without trembling, "I did it for love. I did it for her own good." Gasps echoed through the chamber. This wasn't love. This was control, obsession, and cruelty twisted into a false narrative. Psychologists who studied the case later said, "This is classic coercive control." Abusers often disguise their violence as protection. But the jury wasn't fooled. They saw not a protector, but a predator. The prosecutor stood, voice sharp with fire. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this man did not love his daughter. He caged her. He stripped her of her humanity. He robbed her of years she will never get back." Photos were shown. Evidence was laid bare. Chains, locks, a mattress stained by time and misery. Every detail cut through the courtroom like glass. Some jurors wiped away tears. Others clenched their jaws in fury. And the prosecutor drove the point home. Monsters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes, they sit at the family table. When she took the stand, the room fell silent. Her voice trembled at first but then grew stronger. "He said he loved me," she testified. "But love doesn't lock you away. Love doesn't silence you. Love doesn't keep you underground while the world goes on without you. Each word was a dagger. Her testimony didn't just tell her story, it told the story of survivors everywhere. Like Elizabeth Smart, who once said after her rescue, "My captor took 9 months of my life, but he did not take my soul." And like J.C. Dugard, who revealed after 18 years in captivity, "You don't ever forget, but you can choose how to live again." Her words in court carried that same weight, the unbreakable resilience of someone who should have been broken but wasn't. When it was the judge's turn, the courtroom leaned in. His voice was steady but heavy with outrage. "I have presided over thousands of cases. I have seen cruelty in many forms. But this is unforgivable." The judge's gavel was more than wood on wood, it was the sound of society drawing a line in stone. And yet, the question lingered. Would the punishment fit the crime? Could any sentence truly measure against years of torment? The room went silent as the sentence was read. "You are hereby sentenced." Time seemed to stop. Every survivor held their breath. The daughter closed her eyes, bracing herself. The sentence came down hard, years behind bars. But was it enough? Advocates shouted outside the courthouse. "He will serve a sentence." She served a life. And they were right. Because while he would one day walk free, she would never be free from the memories. This trial echoed others before it. In Austria, Joseph Fritzl locked his daughter away for 24 years. His courtroom heard similar words, claims of love, twisted justifications, and a daughter's voice finally breaking free. In Cleveland, Ariel Castro, who held 3 women captive for over a decade, also sat in court claiming remorse, while the world saw only evil. And just like those trials, this one reminded us. No amount of excuses, no disguise of love, can wash away the truth. What we saw was not a father. What we saw was a monster. And now we turn the question over to you. Do you believe the sentence was justice? Or was it mercy for a man who showed none? Because the truth is, the system can lock away a man. But can it ever give back the years he stole from her? Let us know in the comments below. Do you think justice was truly served? Or should punishment have gone further? Cases like this leave behind more than scars. They leave behind haunting questions. How many basements are still locked? How many doors are still bolted from the inside, hiding secrets too dark for the daylight? And most terrifying of all, how many voices remain silenced, waiting, praying, hoping for someone to listen? The girl in the basement case is more than one story. It is a mirror, reflecting countless others. Stories of captivity. Stories of silence. Stories where love is weaponized, trust is shattered, and innocence is stolen. In Austria, 2008, the world recoiled at the Joseph Fritzl case. He imprisoned his daughter Elisabeth for 24 years in a concealed basement dungeon, fathering 7 children with her. When the truth came out, one Austrian newspaper headline read, "The Monster of Amstetten." And yet, behind that headline was a daughter, broken but unbowed. Elizabeth's words, when finally free, echoed the same truth as our girl in the basement. "I want to live now." These cases force us to ask, what drives a father, a parent, a trusted figure, to transform into a captor? What festers in the darkness of control and obsession until it becomes this kind of evil? Across the ocean in Cleveland, Ariel Castro kidnapped 3 women, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus, and held them captive for over a decade. Neighbors heard music, saw him barbecue, watched him smile. Yet inside his home, unspeakable horror. Michelle Knight said at Castro's sentencing, "I spent 11 years in hell. And now your hell is just beginning." The girl in the basement case is different in detail, but identical in theme. Evil disguised as normalcy, captivity hiding in plain sight, the predator who passes as family. And just like Castro, who eventually took his own life in prison, these monsters leave behind only destruction. These are not isolated tragedies. They are patterns, tragically repeating across borders, cultures, and decades. From the infamous case of Colleen Stan, the young hitchhiker who became the girl in the box, imprisoned in a coffin-like box under her captor's bed for 7 years, to the disappearance of Evelyn Hartley, a 15-year-old babysitter who vanished in 1953, never to be seen again, to Margaret Ellen Fox, who answered a babysitting ad in 1974 and walked into the shadows of history, leaving behind only unanswered questions. Every name is different, but the themes are chillingly the same. Control. Silence. A victim erased from the world, while the abuser walks free among us. What transforms a father into a captor? A neighbor into a predator? A friend into a nightmare? Psychologists call it coercive control, where one person dominates another through manipulation, threats, isolation, and abuse until the victim loses their freedom, their voice, sometimes even their sense of self. It's why so many ask, why didn't she just escape? But escape isn't simple. Escape isn't just about open doors. Escape requires hope, and monsters are masters at crushing hope. As one survivor put it, he didn't just lock the door. He locked my mind. True crime cases captivate us. We binge documentaries. We share podcasts. We follow every update. But we must ask ourselves, do we consume these stories for shock, or for change? Every time a case like this makes headlines, we are reminded of the hidden victims still out there. The children no one is looking for. The women whose names never trend. The girl in the basement case is not just horror, it's a warning. Because if monsters can hide in plain sight once, they can do it again. And still the questions linger. How many Evelyn Hartleys are out there, forever missing? How many Margaret Ellen Foxes, never coming home? How many basements remain closed off to the world, their secrets locked away by silence and fear? We want closure. We want justice. We want clean endings. But sometimes true crime leaves us with nothing but echoes. The girl in the basement case gave us survival, but it also gave us scars that may never heal. The justice system can sentence a man. But can it heal a daughter? Can it give back years lost to darkness? The answer is painfully complicated. And yet, in every darkness there is a glimmer of light. Survivors like Elisabeth Fritzl, Michelle Knight, Elizabeth Smart, and our girl in the basement remind us. Humans can endure almost anything. Elizabeth Smart once said, "You're stronger than you think. Don't let your captor define your life." J.C. Dugard, who survived 18 years in captivity, wrote, "These years are stolen, yes, but I am not stolen. I am still here." And so is she, the girl in the basement, not just a victim, but a survivor, a fighter, a voice for those still trapped in silence. So what does this case leave us with? A reminder that evil is not always distant. Sometimes it lives behind familiar doors. A warning that monsters wear masks, not of strangers in alleyways but of fathers, neighbors, partners. And a question, one I now ask you. Do you believe justice was served? Was the sentence enough for a man who stole years, freedom, and innocence? Or should justice have gone further? Comment below and let us know. Because your voice matters. Your voice could be the one that pushes this conversation forward, that reminds the world never to turn away, never to forget, and never to let silence win. And so, I leave you with this question. Do you think she deserved her sentence? Comment below with your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe for more true crime documentaries, because sadly, there are still countless dark stories waiting to be told.